Welcome to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional Facebook page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can also find all her cool resources at natashahelfer.com. The information shared on this program is informational and should not be considered therapy. This podcast addresses many topics around mental health and sexuality and may not be suitable for minors. Some topics may elicit a trigger or emotional response, so please care for yourself accordingly. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer Podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes is by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Natasha Helfer Podcast, where we go after shame anywhere we can find it and try to destroy it. I need to work on my my tagline. I change it every freaking time. So everybody can bear with me. But basically, the idea is we want to go after shame. And today, I am super excited to have Dane Campbell on my program. He is the author of a book called Growing Up with Satan, which we'll talk about here in a minute. And I met him at Sunstone just this last summer and super excited to have done that. He's a mental health professional. I'm going to read his official bio here in a second. But if you are listening, especially if you are live on Facebook, please know that we love to take online comments, online questions. So if there's anything that you're thinking that you want to share with us, by all means, I'll be keeping track of that. So Dane Campbell grew up in the tiny town of Alton, Utah, the youngest of six. His claim to fame in early life was going to school in Orderville, where I guess Brigham Young directed that the United Order be lived. You're going to have to tell me more about that. He later attended university at Utah State, served a mission in Chicago, Illinois for the LDS Church, and later married his wife in the St. George Temple. He obtained a bachelor's degree and later a master's in social work from Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri. After a short stint working for Father Flanagan's Boys Town, he joined the Air Force and spent 27 years working, administering, and leading programs associated with mental health and later various other medical fields. During his time in the Air Force, he and his wife raised 4 children, lived in 3 other countries, served in Hawaii, and eventually found their way out of the Mormon Church. He retired from the Air Force in 2024, published a short memoir called Growing Up with Satan, opened a private therapy practice dedicated to helping those leaving high-demand religions and groups, and is working to establish greater visibility and helping people navigate and go through change on his social media platforms. After spending 58 years in organizations that had no problem telling him what to do or how to live his life, Dane now spends lots of time discovering who he is and what he wants to be when he grows up. Welcome, Dane, to the program.
Thank you.
It is super nice to have you.
Thanks for the invitation. I love to talk about this kind of thing. You know, for me, the niggle in my head was Satan, but lots of people have lots of different issues when it comes to high demand organizations. And so I think some of the process that I went through can certainly be generalized in helping others find a greater sense of self and understanding.
Yeah. And this is a growing area of interest. And I think, both of us come from a Mormon background ourselves. And so we're going to have some interplay there, but I agree with you. I hear a lot of times from evangelical folks, Jehovah's Witness folks. We have Orthodox Jewish people that show up at our symmetry counseling space, where this is kind of an area where we specialize as well. And so I'm super excited anytime anybody's talking about this topic, writing about this topic, etc. So why don't we go ahead and get you started as far as telling us a little bit about your background. Obviously, you grew up a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which we also call the Mormon Church. And not everybody grows up in the same Mormon upbringing, right? I mean, we're not a monolith. So tell us a little bit about what your experience was growing up in our faith.
Yeah, absolutely. When I say tiny town, I'm talking less than 100 people. Extremely insular. The people that I lived and grew up with, they all looked like me. They all thought like me. Even in high school, a small place. Um, Vast majority of people were from the Mormon church. And so we all shared those same beliefs and not a lot of diversity in that situation. And I would, the heart of Mormonism, Utah County, maybe, but we were like right on the verge of fundamentalism, and they were just around the corner, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Warren Jeff's group, amongst others. So that was uh, a very strong history in Orthodox belief of all things Mormon. Um, I think about a year ago, a lot of hubbub about the second anointing and people not knowing about that. That was probably a topic that was talked about every week.
In your
Having
community.
your calling and election made sure. That was always talked
Wow.
about, in our congregation. So, but, we're like a lot of other folks within the religion. A lot of things weren't talked about. I think I was probably in my 40s before I realized Joseph Smith had multiple wives. And so, even in that kind of a community, you don't know everything. So,
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, and not everybody who listens to this podcast is super versed about some of these terms. So you had mentioned in your bio, like the United Order, was something that was
oh,
directly
yeah.
in your town in particular. So do you want to explain a little bit what that means?
Yeah, so the law of consecration or the United Order, Mormons' definition of socialism, I guess, where everything is taken in common and then people are given, what they need to survive out of the common storehouses or goods or whatever you want to call it. And so this experiment was tried in Orderville for a time. And I haven't done the research on this myself. Apparently, it failed because at the pants factory, one of the kids wanted a pair of red pants. And so, that blossomed into everybody wanting red pants. And I guess, the United Order was sunk because of the red pants. I
Because
don't
of
know.
the red
Anyway,
pants. Oh, this sounds like a great folklore.
exactly. I need to do the research and see if that actually happened, but that
Okay.
was the fable of why the United Order failed
Okay. So the
in
United
Orderville, Utah.
in
Yeah.
Orderville.
Yes.
Okay. Do you think that was that part of the naming of the town?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Founding fathers, very proud of that. Very proud of the fact that um, them and their, polygamous historical folks went there to do that work.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the divine order kind of fell apart throughout the mainstream Mormon church, and I don't even remember how many years it lasted, but it was probably like about a decade. Is that correct?
Yeah, I honestly don't know how long it lasted, but it's very difficult, to have people who have actual needs give up all of those needs for the good of the community, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that city was not lifted up to Zion like,
Mm. Like
other
the
places
myths,
were.
right? Well, the idea being that if you lived this type of life, that you could
Exactly.
potentially be eligible for transcendence as a community, right? This is kind of the ideas that we grew up with. Okay, so divine order didn't stick, but orthodoxy did. It sounds like it was a
Oh, yes.
Orthodox community, fairly white community, I'm assuming,
Hmm.
and not a lot of diversity. So you're growing up in this space, and tell us a little bit about the psyche of that? How did that affect you? Was it,
So,
go ahead.
yeah, for me, isolation was probably one of the biggest issues that I faced. There just weren't a lot of kids my age, especially in the town that I was from. So, just my I'm much young, the youngest child in my family by a lot of years, and so there was uh, obviously the desire to have connection, which I found a lot with, the ranchers and the other people that I could work with. It was kind of like a community's bringing up, the kids, and so there were good things about it, right? Because there was a lot of support, a lot of care, and
Community like
you never
infrastructure.
felt like you couldn't go to somebody's house and be welcomed in because you knew everybody so well. But that has some disadvantages because there's no anonymity, there's no secrets, and you can imagine, for me, I I felt a lot of times like there were parts of me that I had to hide um, because of teachings in the church. And, you know, you just didn't want to put all that stuff out there. And sometimes that, is difficult given the fact that you're in such a small place where everybody knows your business all the time. I admittedly grew up with a lot of shame and guilt over, um, you know, discovering who I was as a boy, as a young man. And I have a mentor. I learned to lie in bishop's interviews because there was no goddamn way I was telling my bishop, who I was out hauling hay with all week, who I had been sitting down to lunch with, and his family, they were not going to know what I was doing in my bedroom at night. And so I learned to lie at a very young age because you were asked the questions, are you chaste? Do you masturbate? Do you do all the things? And the answer had to be no. So I have a great mentor who said, yeah, you learned to lie, but you learned how to survive in a cult. And that was a coping mechanism to be able to do that.
Mm.
And so even though there's great and good things coming from the religion and the culture, I think there are some very unhealthy things that come out of that. Do you understand
Oh yeah,
know what I
absolutely.
mean?
Right. So yeah, the positive thing I'm hearing the most of here is like the community infrastructure, right? Support and people know each other, and especially if there's like an emergency or something, people come
Right,
together, right? They feed each other, they're in community with one another. On the other hand, you mix that with high demand beliefs. Now there's a lot of monitoring, it's a lot of control, it's a lot of feeling like you're living under the microscope.
right, right.
People kind of, figuring out whether or not you fit or not. And there's only one way to fit is to
Exactly.
be part of that belief system. And so if anything is not feeling like it lands, then you either learn how to hide it, or you learn how to compartmentalize it, or you learn how to become a serial confessor, I guess, or you learn a lot of different
Right, right.
strategies. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so it sounds like this came pretty early for you sexually, especially as a young. In our tradition, we start asking people worthiness questions like as young as 11 and 12. And so from a pretty early age, you knew that you didn't want people knowing these private details of your life.
Yeah, as someone who would discover masturbation quite early, and then, you're in priesthood one day and you have the big lesson where this thing is terrible and you shouldn't be doing. And it was such a slap upside the head because I had never even thought that it was wrong or bad. I mean, my parents had never talked to me about it. And so um, it was very confusing, right? Suddenly you're doing Satan's work rather than, um, you know, very difficult to understand for a 12-year-old who just doesn't have um, the foundation and the knowledge and the education to try to work all that out. So
Right.
that, immediately shame and guilt and all of those things come rushing in when it simply did not need to be there.
Mhm. And hadn't been there until you were
Oh,
sitting.
right, right. Until that moment when you're like,
Oh,
that's what this is? Oh my God. I'm horrible.
I wasn't even sure if it was what I was doing because I was like, well, they're only telling the guys about it. So I think I might be doing it too, but I'm not sure.
Right.
Nobody was explaining anything.
Yeah. And just, the to willingness to really try to hold you accountable, but unwillingness to explain anything,
Yeah.
and try to talk about, why is this really bad? There
Yeah.
was none of that.
Right. Right. And then it would upset God, I guess. And there's a lot of because there are a lot of reasons we grew up thinking sexuality would ruin our lives. Like we would become addicted or we would become perverse or we would become sexual perpetrators or molesters. I mean, there was a lot of vitriolic kind of ways that they would scare us about our sexual
Yeah, I,
potential.
I think Kimball, and I remember him, he had the whole progression, right? So if you masturbate, you're going to become gay, you're going to become perverted, you're going to become a child molester. Um, Anybody in the comments, tell me if I'm wrong, because I think that was his path to,
Yeah.
you know,
To the
destruction. And
destruction of
so,
your soul.
uh, if that's the information you're getting, it is so out of this world compared to what a normal kid going through a normal developmental process, what they actually experience.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, very challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you titled the name of your book, Growing Up with Satan, told by a brother that knew him well. Is that the subtitle? Is that correct? Yes.
Exactly.
So, which I think is just kind of a brilliant title. So let's talk about this a little bit. Why did you name your book that? And not only why, but let's start explaining what it's like to grow up with a satanic figure that is being taught on a pretty regular basis.
Yeah, so being a kid that was alone, I had a pretty vivid imagination. And I will tell you that to me, God was real, right? I
Mhm.
could envision him on his throne looking down on me, passing judgment. You had a good day, you had a shitty day, whatever. I could envision him, and I spent a lot of hours in conversation with him. Because I think there's a scripture that says always carry a prayer in your heart. So when you ain't got anybody else to talk to, I'm having this conversation with God. So based upon my personality, who I was, it was not a stretch for me to have a very vivid and real idea of who Satan was. And and for those who are not members of the church, we're told and taught that in the spirit world before we were born, all of us lived as spirits with God, and Satan was, born early to God. He was a brother with Jesus. They were good pals until it came down to the plan that we would all follow to get back to God. So there's Jesus's plan where we come down and make choices. And if you make enough good choices and believe in Jesus, you get to go live with God again. Satan's plan was to take away the choice, but we'd all go live with God. I grew up during the Satanic Panic as well.
Mm.
So there was a lot of popular culture messages out there about the power of Satan, who he was, what he could do to you, how he could possess you. And the church didn't help that at all, right? Um, and even today, um, I probably have family members who think I'm under the influence of Satan right now. What I'm doing is wrong. And uh, I'm leading people away from God because of Satan. So it was not a stretch for me to become very, very knowledgeable about who I thought Satan was and what he could do to me and the power that he could have in my life. And to go so far as to possess me, to lead me down to hell, I don't know what that even means really at this point, if you think about it critically. But all that being said, I had this fear constantly that I would do too many wrong things in a day, and then Satan was going to be taking over my body.
Mhm.
So uh, that's why I named the book Growing Up with Satan. It was a constant message, constant teaching, almost to the point where a lot of times I felt like that was focused on more than Jesus and God.
Mm.
So it was a control tactic, understand where it's coming from, but not good for somebody like me who could envision what that could potentially mean. And then, you have all the stories about the kids who were talking about Satan, and then this happened to them, and he tried to possess them. And, all of those stories at our fathers and sons outings. And yeah, it was just crazy, crazy in my mind how much power that had over me.
Yeah, and as you talk about this, I just place this like psychology lens on top of this. Like we really do raise, and I think this is quite frankly the reality for most of Christianity and even other religious traditions that have other types of what I'd call boogeymen,
Yeah.
where we use a scary figure to scare children into doing the right thing. I mean, that's not really a Mormon story. That's not even a Christian story. That's like,
Well,
I mean,
right.
Hansel and Gretel. I mean, that was the scary witch, that's going to cook you alive. It seems like there's been this parenting technique throughout the history of humankind that if we don't scare children, they will somehow not do the right thing. Like, how did you start understanding this concept, especially as you started becoming a psychologist and studying?
Well, I would like to say I saw right through it, but
Okay,
that wasn't the case.
yeah, and most of us did not, right? When you're
Because
swimming.
you say children, but the talks in conference, Natasha, they are focused at the adults. And we still get messages that Satan is unbounded in his power and he's doing all these things to bring the church down, to bring missionary work to a halt, to stop the temple work. Any opposition, any thing that goes against what the brethren are teaching or what they're trying to get done is oftentimes blamed or laid at the feet of Satan, right?
um,
And so I wish I could say that as I did my social work training, I got really good at, um, you know, challenging these beliefs and whatever. But it took me a very long time to kind of give up this idea that there is you know, this mythical being out there just waiting to sweep in and take over. Uh, so
yeah.
I lay the death of that belief at the feet of uh, about the same time of the death of my belief in God, because they were on kind of the same plane. And so I don't have, good evidence of either one at this point in my life. And I don't know if that gets to the point that you were making, but I think for a lot of people, um, to have an entity out there that you can blame badness on, or people's poor decisions, or people going against the grain, I think that's just a lot easier than admitting that some people do really bad things. Um, some people make bad decisions, and a lot of people go against the grain because it doesn't fit for them. So it's easier to, have a mythical creature that has the power than to just say, accept where people are at and then learn to live with that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think I started with the children because I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, there's people who convert to religions when they are adults. And yeah, I'm not so sure that it would be as convincing of an argument if we only taught satanic kind of beliefs to adults only.
Yeah.
I guess my point is that this story is absorbed in us from a very early age.
Yeah.
And go
So
ahead.
for me, I and a cousin, uh, back in the day when the church paid custodians, my mom was one for a while. And we were playing sacrament. We weren't of age yet to do the sacrament, but we were pretending
Oh yeah.
at the church, while she was cleaning.
Right.
And she came down and saw what we were doing, and man, she was an awesome woman, level-headed, hardly to me. My brothers and sisters have different stories, but to me, she was always pretty kind, level-headed. Didn't punish too hard. But she had a story about two boys that were doing something similar down at a town down the road, and at some point, you know because they were so bad in doing that thing that they weren't supposed to do, God punished them and they were killed in a lightning strike or some god awful thing. Anyway, I guess I was probably 8 or 9 years old thinking, I am so bad. Satan must really have the ability to make me, a kid, do some rotten things. And so for me, that was kind of where I think it got started. Is just, if people make a bad decision, then that's the entity that it gets blamed on. And you've got to do everything you can to stay out of his power. So, you're chasing the perfection wheel, so that you do more good than bad.
Mhm.
If you kind
Yeah.
of get my drift.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to really impress upon people, because so many of us did grow up with ideas of God or Satan, that I think sometimes we don't, sometimes when you're in the midst of like difficult things, you don't realize how difficult they are, right? And I guess
Yeah,
what I want to impress upon the listeners is that we tell these stories of a God or of a Satan to very young, impressionable children. And here's an example where you're 8 or 9 years old. And is your mother upset with you that you're all pretending to do the sacrament because you don't
yeah,
have the
yeah. I
correct
think
authority?
right, right. You're not supposed to be doing this.
So
You're too
here's like
young.
a very natural, normal thing, right?
Yeah,
Little kids play adult, right? We play with our shopping carts, we play with our mechanic tools, right? We play with our dolls. We're playing adult.
yeah,
So here you boys are playing church adults and you're passing the sacrament, and your mother is so, indoctrinated in this type of belief system that she sees a ritual that you're not doing in the correct way and ties it to this very scary entity of,
yeah,
and like what you're describing, like something landed there for you, right? Even as an 8-year-old, even as a 9-year-old, you're like, wow, I must be really bad, or I must be really impressionable, or, and we're not developed human beings where those kinds of stories, which are really horror shows, Satan is
hmm
really a horror
yeah,
show.
yeah.
horror shows are meant for adult entertainment. I know that everybody's so scared about porn. I'm like, how about just horror shows are meant,
Right.
they're meant for adults. And even then I hate them. They still scare me, right? And they
Yeah,
have a
yeah,
visceral reaction in my body. I know a lot of people love horror shows. That's fine. But I have a visceral reaction in my body of fear. And how are you supposed to make sense of that as a little kiddo? And you can see how these things become so ingrained, right, in our self-identity,
yeah,
in our
yeah.
self-behavior. So it's just it's a bit of a it's a bit of a mind fuck. And I hate to use that term, but it is.
Yeah, it is. And I think you get the message over and over again. It's not just parents, but it's coming from the pulpit, a general conference. It's coming from the pulpit in your wards and in your stakes. It's discussions amongst your youth leaders. And, it's pervasive. It's ever present. And so I do appreciate what you're saying in the sense that we should be a little bit more mindful of the messages that we're giving and what effect they actually can have on people,
Wow.
you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. Well, and to your point too, like if this is how we explain incorrect human behavior, it's also a bypassing of responsibility, right? It's like, well,
Yeah,
I wouldn't have done that left to my own devices. It was Satan, right? It's like Satan made me.
right,
Satan tempted
exactly.
me. Some Satan, all those things. And so it almost like bypasses personal accountability and responsibility.
Well, I think it does. And it really takes the onus off of. So I'm thinking about some of these battles that the churches had, with these temples that they try to put up, and then citizen groups come forward and say, "Wait, you're not following zoning, you're not listening to the community about what our needs are, what we want." Well, if they can just say that that's a satanic push against the truth going forward into the world, then they don't have to spend the time to try to work with the community. They can just hire their high-priced lawyers and bowl over the situation. They don't have to have a conversation and gain understanding and try to compromise. They can just bowl over the situation and say, "See, God was at our back.
Mhm.
We overcame Satan." So there's a lot of ways that I think that this is sort of a pernicious um, belief.
Mhm.
And just, a whole culture. We were in the satanic panic. Give me a break.
Mhm.
All of the badness that was attributed to an entity that, in my opinion, isn't there. And so,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking of kind of two categories. Not that it's so simple, but it's like if there are things that most of us would agree are not really wonderful ways humans show up, like, I don't know, stealing something or sexually assaulting something, so there's behaviors that most of us would agree falls outside of our moral framework.
yeah,
And if we blame Satan for that, then it doesn't give responsibility to the person. And then there's all these other behaviors that really are just depending on what culture you grew up in, whether or not you're going to wear certain garb, for example, right? I mean, the Amish wear certain garb, the Muslims
yeah,
wear
yeah,
certain garb, the Mormons wear certain garb. Well, now, if you don't want to wear that garb, which is really a religiously construed ideology that may or may not have anything to do with morality, but now we can use Satan to say, see, if you don't want to conform to the standards that we have decided as a community are important to be part of the member of this organization,
right,
then that's Satan too. So there's no ability to one, take responsibility for actions that we need to take responsibility for.
right.
There's no ability to explore outside of the realm that's been presented without thinking you're influenced by Satan.
Absolutely.
So Satan, he's everywhere.
And that's why that's why I think you get confused, right? Who has more power, Jesus or Satan? If I do something wrong, well, as a member of the church, when I had the Holy Ghost, the gift of the Holy Ghost, if I did something wrong, I was taught that the Holy Ghost was immediately gone, right?
Right.
When do I need the Holy Ghost? When I do something wrong and I need that support, right? But instead, the Holy Ghost is gone, and now I've opened up myself to the buffetings of Satan. So it's very confusing doctrine, and I don't think it just exists in Mormonism. I think to write the fan fiction on this guy is in and of itself a world of confusion.
Yeah, no, Satan is definitely not a Mormon concept by any means, but and even the language around Satan is very, I guess what I would call provocative. You know,
Yeah.
there's imagery of hell and fire and gnashing of teeth and pulling you out your hair and eternal torment. And again, like this is, we create quite the visuals for people to have a very, it's like a psychological assault.
Yeah. I was really thinking about this the other day, and I was thinking, what would it really look like if a spirit could possess me? If Satan's spirit could possess me, what would that really be like? And I think, historically, people would say that they have seen that happen. I would argue that we, as mental health professionals, would probably describe those events as somebody who's suffering from psychosis or a delusion or something to that effect. When I was about 15, I had an experience where I actually thought I was being possessed because of circumstances. I wrote about that in my book. What I came to understand, that is something I came to understand as I did my psychological training, was that that was an anxiety attack. I had worked myself up into such a frenzy that I gave myself anxiety, a panic attack, worried that Satan was possessing me.
Mm-hmm.
So um, I think there's lots of other explanations for those kinds of events. And I could be wrong. I'll admit it if I am. Um, but honestly, yeah, I totally agree with you. The pictures, the stories, the power that we're supposed to give him and have deference to is just too much.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a listener who's writing in. Mark says, my mother left the church in 1995 and I left in 2016. She was not into guilt, which is the outcome of the invention of hell and Satan. On a psychological level, this is the outcome of all this crap, living in fear and guilt, which both leave when you leave the church. Must always remember that Mormonism, as with all religion, is made up fiction to control others. My mother, after she left the church, kept telling me to take my power back, quote unquote. And I'm glad I did before she passed. The other psychological impact aspect of this, that there are personalities naturally more susceptible to the influence of controlling religions. So the key questions in my book are what makes people suckers to this and what makes them stay in controlling religions. This is Mark Stoddard. Do you want to talk a little bit about that as far as any comments back to this particular person?
Yeah, I would first of all avoid calling people suckers because there are uh, thousands of intelligent, good people who choose to be a part of a high control group. And you can call it religion, you can any other high control group, right? I spent 27 years in the Air Force. It's a high control group. So people um, do that. Part of it is cultural, that, they learn where they're in the culture that they're born into, they learn to be a part of that culture. And so those beliefs become a part of them. And until, there's something that shakes that loose, and until they go through something where they can actually take a step back and look at the teachings and the beliefs and what they hold dear to themselves, um, people are going to stay. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter how intelligent you are. Um, you're going to hold on to those beliefs because that's where you came from. That's what you're grounded in. And so it's been my experience. You maybe have a totally different experience, Natasha, but um, people don't find their way out of these types of groups until something personal happens to make them start to question what they've been taught, question what their truth was. It's a scary thing. It's a difficult thing. Walking away from my religion is the hardest thing. It's the single most hardest thing I've done in my life, um, hands down. And so I will give people a break. They're doing what they know, and until something kind of shakes that loose, they'll continue to do what they know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I really appreciate you saying that. And I've been saying this for many years is that it's so multifaceted, all the things that go into our beliefs, our
Mhm.
identities, our ideas, that we have people of all different IQ levels, people of all socioeconomic classes, people of all genders and races saying, yes, this is true, and saying, no, this is all a bunch of crap. So it is really
Yeah,
interesting that way. And I would totally agree with you that it's not usually through logic that shift comes, it's through emotion and emotional lived experiences. Even something we were just talking about this the other day with some colleagues of mine, like even something that I think conservative communities are a little bit worried about is when their young people go to college, right? It's like you're going
yeah,
to college,
absolutely.
and the professors, the education is going to be what leads you away from our belief system. And what really, it's not so much the education, it's the diversity that they are now exposed to, right?
Yeah,
Right. Not just a certain teaching, it's a variety of teachings, it's a variety of people from a variety of backgrounds that they now, especially if they're coming from an insular community like you did, and
right.
no prior experience with something other than what they grew up with, it makes it very difficult to shift these beliefs.
Yeah, you realize that, people of color are just there to, better themselves, and they're good people just like you are, and they came from good families just like you did. You realize that people who hold a different sexual orientation that maybe you did and thought was horrible, they're just good people that are trying to live their life as best they can. And so you start making those connections, and you realize um, you got to give up some of those ideas that you were born and bred with because they just don't fit anymore. And I think that can go into when a person loses their religion as well. You have experiences outside of it. You start to do a little bit of learning, and then suddenly it doesn't make sense to you the way that it used to.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move into that. Let's move into what starts happening for you, what starts shifting. I mean, you just kind of led into that, right? Like it's not just something
Yeah,
you
I
didn't
mean,
really say, hey, Dane, I think Satan is a problem. What ended up happening?
yeah, I think, I kind of lived my whole life looking over my shoulder, thinking that all the bad I did, and the fact that, sometimes I didn't like going to church, sometimes I didn't like what was going on there. Um, all of that were feelings put in my heart by Satan, right? Rather than just the fact that I was different and had a different view of everybody around me, right? So, um, but interestingly enough, my oldest son, we were living in the UK at the time. He had a big issue with Proposition 8, which was a proposition in California to repeal legal marriage for homosexuals. It was already legal to be married, but Prop 8 was to repeal that.
Right.
He was just very upset about how the church was trying to insert itself. People from Utah calling Californians and trying to influence them, and all of the money that was put into that situation. And I was deployed at the time, and he was up into the night on the computer having a faith crisis, and my wife was very concerned. She thought he had a porn addiction. Well, I
Mm.
said, look at his browser history, and he's reading about the history and doctrines of the church.
Oh, wow.
And she started to look into that. I started to look into that. And suddenly the whole framework of Mormonism stopped working for the family. The things that we were learning about, reading about, they were not what it had professed to be. And so I did, several years, 2 or 3 years of reading, and came to the conclusion that I could no longer believe in the church, which meant Satan, for me, no longer existed.
Mhm.
Immediate relief when I made that decision. No more guilt, no more shame. A lot of difficulty, I will say, a lot of difficulty when you lose all of your foundational beliefs in what life is about and what the purpose of it is. And I'm still working through that. And I'm fine to admit it. I have my existential crisis days, and I have days that are better. But I'm happier now because I don't have uh, a invisible entity trying to control my life.
Mm.
I can use this, and I can use this, and I can be a human and make better decisions than I ever made before.
Yeah. And by the
So,
way, for
does
those of
that give
yeah,
you my
for those
little
of you,
story in a nutshell?
yeah, exactly. For those of you listening, when he said this and this, he pointed at his brain and at his heart. So he can use his brain and his heart to make to live your life instead of through these entities. So the lived experience sounds like, because I'm assuming, just like me, that we grew up hearing that there was anti-Mormon literature or some of these ideas that we were taught to write off as
Right.
kind of like fake news of the time.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, don't pay attention. These are fake news. And
Don't
then
look over here.
right. So I'm guessing what shifted for you is that now you have a son, so somebody you care about deeply who is starting to question
Mhm.
and so I'm guessing that lands differently than just hearing somebody at work or something like that mention something that would go against your beliefs. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think what it was is the desire to truly understand what he was learning. And so to gain understanding, you've got to educate yourself. And dear God, there's, rabbit hole after rabbit hole you can go down. When you pull your head out of the Book of Mormon proper and start, looking at where this all came from, who was doing what, who was saying what, who was teaching what. And then you're like, why haven't I ever seen all of this before? And then you realize it's a very carefully curated message that you are given. It's a very carefully curated message that you are given to give to other people, whether that's on your mission as a teacher, as a leader in the church. These are the things that are okay to talk about. These are the okay things to teach about. And don't look at everything else. And so I think the information age really opened up the eyes of a lot of people to be able to understand and start to accept, right? And gain greater visibility on a lot of the difficult issues.
Right, right. Well, and you mentioned that on the one hand, that moment, it sounds like there was a moment when you were like, okay, this doesn't, I don't have to believe in Satan. And right away, there was relief. There was no guilt. There was, or at least a releasing of guilt and shame that were probably what we might consider inappropriate shame and guilt. There's
Yeah.
times that guilt and even shame are appropriate. But boy, are we putting a lot of shame bricks. We're laying the foundation of shame brickyards that are unnecessary. And then on the other
Yeah.
hand, what made it difficult, it sounds like, was ambiguity, uncertainty, existential meaning of life type stuff, because what Satan does offer through the construct of Christianity is structure. You know, if you do this, God will be happy. If you do this, Satan will be happy. And
We're
so,
going to get schwacked.
yeah, we organize our entire lives on like a structure of certainty that when we let it go, even though we have these benefits, there's also these hardships of,
Right.
yeah, like you said, painting.
Yeah. So if I could describe it, if you've ever been to the beach and you're standing in the sand, right? And the waves kind of come up and they will come and take the sand out from under your feet if you stand there long enough, right? And so you go down, down, down.
Right.
So that's kind of what losing the religion was like for me. You know, here was Mormonism, and I had built my whole belief system, my whole purpose of life. And even though I didn't like doing Mormonism a lot of times, that was what I knew and what I believed to be, the right way. And so all of that foundation is gone. And you're just kind of stuck in the world going, what am I doing here? What is the freaking point?
Right.
And for me, I've never found another replacement.
Mhm.
So I'm probably fall within that camp of, anybody telling me what to do now in terms of that. I'm very, very critical of it because I felt like, you know, I was betrayed. And that is very difficult to get over. So many years of anger, all of the posts on Reddit, please don't read my Reddit. All of that stuff, I'm in a bit of a different place now. The anger for those that are watching, the anger eventually dissipates. You have to ride through those waves, find ways to deal with it constructively, hopefully, and really deconstruct and look at the parts, the beliefs. Even if you leave, you still have these beliefs that live within you. And you really kind of have to examine them and say, do I want to keep that? Or do I want to replace it with something else or just get rid of it entirely? So you've really got to kind of look critically at how you think about things once you leave so that you can decide if that's going to serve you well. Because, you know, just being a non-Mormon out of Mormonism to Mormon more, is that a good, healthy thing? I don't know. Maybe it is, but maybe somebody wants to examine those past beliefs or motivations or the reason that they do things and decide if that's really going to serve them.
Yeah.
So I think when you say talk about deconstructing, that's really what it is. Looking at each of those motivations and beliefs and asking yourself, where did that come from? Is it serving me? If not, how do I change it?
Yeah. Right. Which is the reconstruction part.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. What were your goals in writing this book and in writing this? What were you hoping? And as people potentially, I mean, I recommend people get it. So what?
So I first and foremost, it was a way to heal.
Yeah.
I wanted to get clear on why this idea of Satan was so powerful in my life.
Mhm.
And so it helped me sort of isolate that, some of the teachings, some of the things that I went through and the experiences, and actually helped me to kind of move past the anger a little bit and move beyond what I was suffering with for so long. Um, that fear, terrible, terrible. Um, but so first and foremost, it was just sort of a here's my story, kind of what I went through and how at different major um, life events, how I kind of seen this affecting what I was going through and how I was thinking about things. Um, so I didn't have in mind that I'm going to change a lot of lives out there, but I did want to tell my story. I wanted to write it down. And I think at this point, it can be helpful for people. Like I said early on, for me, it was this belief in Satan, but for other people, it could be other things, right? We know that people become obsessive about, I don't know, the word of wisdom or purity culture, the purity culture, chastity, not thinking bad thoughts, what you say, not drinking caffeine. Um, any
Reading,
of these
like reading
teachings
scriptures incessantly.
can get wrapped around somebody's synapses and not be beneficial for them if
Mhm.
they take it to an extreme.
Mhm.
Because I don't care what anybody says. Nobody's perfect. Everybody's going to screw up. So let's have some self-compassion and just realize we're going to make mistakes. So if you generalize anything from this book, it's not necessarily the belief in Satan. It could be any belief that you're holding on to that is, impeding your progress to some sort of peace and happiness in life.
Yeah, right. So it sounds like it was part of your own healing journey. And then
Hmm.
you're also seeing it as potentially one of several resources now out there to for people to be able to relate, people be able to be like, oh, me too, or I hadn't thought about that. Is there something in his story that could be paralleling my story?
Right.
Which is how we community heal, right? This is why telling our stories are such an important part of the healing process. So, what would you, I know we're coming up on time, but what would your thoughts be in regard? I have two kind of big questions, so you can decide how you want to talk about them. But you are a clinician, you're now a clinician who's specializing in religious trauma, in deconstruction of
Right.
religious worldviews. So, what are some messages you would want people to know who are potentially maybe going into that type of work and especially getting ready to work with a clinician? And then the second question is what would you want other clinicians to know? So two really big questions to lay at your feet.
Okay, so the first one was people that are going into,
Yeah, people who are looking, people who are struggling with religious trauma, maybe they're in the
okay,
middle of that angry phase, maybe they're
yeah,
going through some existential crisis, maybe they're not even sure if they want to leave their religion or not yet. What are some things, some basic principles you would say, hey, here's a few thoughts for you to think about. Here's what you might look for in a therapist, etc.
yeah. So one of the things I would just encourage people to absolutely do is just take care of themselves because if you're thinking about this and considering it, you're going to get a lot of pushback either from the religion or family or um, your your culture in general. So depending on what the religion is, so you gotta have a way to take care of yourself. So whether that's finding people that are in a similar situation who are going through it. And just know that you will not be alone in this process. I don't know of any major religious group who does not have some sort of online presence. Some are smaller than others, but whether it's, Reddit groups, YouTube people, Facebook groups, there will be people out there who can sustain you and support you. And I would just say take the process very, very slow. You don't have to be an Orthodox Jew today and be an atheist tomorrow. There's a lot of things you can be in between all of that, but just take it slow and do what feels right to you. I just made a video on my YouTube channel that talked about the fact that in high control groups, very, very seldom are we taught to take care of ourselves. I want people to learn how to take care of themselves and do things that really can show self-compassion and build their capacity to build themselves. And there's a lot of things we can do to do that. That's like, a whole podcast series in and of itself. But yeah, just take it slow, take it easy, realize that everything you were told probably isn't true. And just one step at a time. It's a marathon.
Yeah.
For clinicians,
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead.
clinicians. So I just had an experience today. A potential client called and she said, when they found out she was of a particular cultural group, immediately the clinician changed, became less listening, supportive, and caring. As a clinician, if you are going to treat people, you have taken the obligation to look beyond what they look like, what they sound like, what their orientation is, what religion they come from. It does not matter. You have taken an obligation to help that person sort out whatever is bothering them and help them find some peace and happiness in life. That's the bottom line. I don't care if you have an issue with whatever culture they came from, whatever religion they came from, whatever they're doing behind closed doors with their partners. I don't care. You have to learn how to set that aside, be supportive and empathetic, and lend a listening ear and help them figure out their stuff. So if you're not willing to do that as a clinician, don't do this work, because that's what it means to be a clinician. So I don't want to be harsh. I don't want to be harsh, Natasha, but when clients call and say, I wasn't listened to, why? That's our job.
Yeah.
Job number one. So,
well, and this is why it's so important. I mean, just really fast, I'm going to go on a soapbox here about talking to clinicians. And by the way, you're a member of the Mormon Mental Health Association as well. I forgot to mention that at the beginning. And so, I founded that organization primarily because of this exact issue that you're talking about, that sometimes clinicians, whether they be on the religious side of things or the secular side of things, have an internal bias towards the clients coming into their office. And the reason why we can't just say, well, I just won't work with those clients. I just won't work with the gay people, right? I just won't work with the non-Mormon people, right? I just won't work with the religious people, is that you don't know when your client is actually going to come out to you.
Right.
As potentially having one of these identities, right? Or doing identity work. And so the amount of harm that can be done to a client that, you've been working with, and it's like, oh, well, this has been fine. But now you're disclosing this other part of you that I can't handle as a clinician.
then I have to throw you away.
Right. It just
Yeah.
causes tremendous harm. And so this is a high, you
It's
mentioned
another
that.
trauma, Natasha. It's another trauma that they are going to have to deal with and go through.
Yeah. And sometimes I feel like, especially when I'm talking to some of my colleagues, and we see this a lot. I know you're in California, but here in Utah, there's a lot of intersection between religious therapists and
Hmm.
non-religious therapists. It was the same thing for me when I lived in Kansas. A lot of Christian counselors versus
Yeah.
non-Christian counselors. It just seemed like oftentimes the complaint I would get from the more religious therapists is like, well, my beliefs also need to be respected, and I'm like, you're not the client.
Right.
I'm not going to treat you like a client. I'm going to treat you like a colleague. And I'm going to call you out on your
And
inability.
when they're paying their therapist,
Then it's
then
different.
then all of that. Yes. Okay.
Exactly right. So
Yeah.
it is this very tender space, and it is a high calling. You mentioned that not only were you in Mormonism, but you were in the Air Force, which is a high demand career. Well, I was thinking about therapists. That's a high demand career.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
no joke. We are held to very high standards. We are held to almost impossible ethics of trying to
Right.
meet clients where they're at while also trying to help them understand there's more than where they're at. And sometimes where they're at is not
Absolutely.
the healthiest, is not considered the healthiest space in kind of psychological spaces. And so we have to do our own work. I think it's even harder than the jobs of doctors and nurses. My doctor's not meeting me where I'm at. My doctor's like, Natasha, you've got to lose some weight. I'm like, but I'm at a place where I really enjoy my Krispy Kreme donuts. I don't care. Sounds like a you problem.
No, I totally understand what you're saying.
So
And
yeah, it's very tender.
yeah,
Uh,
and I will say the greatest gift I ever had from my career in the Air Force was people who trusted me enough to tell me about the shit they actually went through. Um, we can all have that as clinicians because everybody goes through it, but you have to be willing to meet people where they're at and create that space for them. And if they get any sense that you're not accepting of them, you will not get that opportunity.
mhm.
You'll not get the opportunity to be privileged to hear their stuff, their real stuff.
Yeah, the real story. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, if for those of you who are listening, I know that there are a lot of therapists and professionals who listen to this podcast, but most of you are not. I think where this is really important is finding someone where you feel safe to do this work with. And I'm here to tell you that most of us have been trained. Well, all of us have been trained in ethics, and all of us have been trained in some small aspect of um, religious and cultural diversity, but not nowhere near what we should be trained. And so
Yeah.
it's important to find people that you will feel safe with and resonate with. And sadly, that's not always us. That's not always the person you're sitting with.
Right. Right. And be willing to have that conversation with clients or potential clients and let them know it's okay. If I'm not your cup of tea,
mm,
bail, go find somebody that is, because, really, I'm not here to make a buck. I'm here to help you.
yeah.
So if I'm not doing it for you, go see Natasha, go see her colleagues. Find somebody that you feel connected to so that you can open up and do real work.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that a lot. Well, Dane, it's been a pleasure to interview you. Is there
Can
any?
I show you my book?
Yes, please show that. So I was just going to say, he's the author of Growing Up with Satan, told by a brother that knew him well. This is Dane Campbell. Uh, please
So I'm
go get
doing
it.
some work. I have a little fledgling YouTube channel, Change with Dane. I just talk about very basic principles of change, whether that's in thought or behavior. And so that's on there. I've started writing again on Substack, again, Change with Dane. If you want to just see the inner workings of this, it's a little scary, but it's fun. That's one of the things that brings me peace is writing. And so those are kind of my two big things. I'm on Psychology Today, Headway, and I also have my own website, Change with Dane. So if people do want to reach out, and I'm happy to continue this discussion, or if people just want to reach out, that's how you would find me.
I love that. So yeah, if you're listening, like let's definitely support the people who come on the podcast. I think this was a great book. I'm sharing on the threads your Instagram account, your YouTube account. So follow Dane and offer some of your perspectives. You're obviously, more than welcome to leave questions and things here that I can pass on to him as well. And he is on the Mormon Mental Health Association. You are taking new clients, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Available for work if you've connected or resonated with Dane in some way today. And I wish you the best in this ongoing journey that so many of us are on together.
Thanks, Natasha. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat, and I do hope it was helpful for some.
Yeah, no, I think that talking about Satan, it's so interesting. I don't think in the religious trauma world we talk about that particular thing as much as I'd like to sometimes. We're talking about kind of other generic belief systems, but this one of a boogeyman that's out to get you and out to tempt you and out to and not only out to do those things, but has access to you in some way, shape, or form that is very difficult to understand. Like you said, like somehow he must be able to possess me or be in my brain or be in my body, is such a psychologically harmful teaching. And this is what I want to just really, especially invite parents to consider, is how are these teachings landing in very impressionable young minds? They're trying to figure out who they are and what they're about. And if so much of what they're about is tied to a satanic figure, that really leaves a mark. And I think many of us are dealing with the ramifications and harm that has come from those kinds of belief systems. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing, Dane. And I will see you at the next MMHA meeting.
All right. Thanks, Natasha.
Take care.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional Facebook page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can also find all her cool resources at natashahelfer.com. The information shared on this program is informational and should not be considered therapy. This podcast addresses many topics around mental health and sexuality and may not be suitable for minors. Some topics may elicit a trigger or emotional response, so please care for yourself accordingly. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer Podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes is by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening.
There is a place where time slows to nature's pace, and there is space there to find yourself in her embrace. Some places should be left alone. Naho tishki say the Navajo, so we can always go the homeland of the heart. 10,000 years of our human history etched on her canyon walls, alongside Earth's mysteries. Some places should be left alone. Något geschehen alone. So we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart. Deep in our cities, we sleep without her stars, yet still her presence sustains us from afar. Some places should be left alone. Något geschehen alone. So we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the home